And make sure your comments are relatively short so that other people also have a chance to ask questions. We see the first one. Okay, Boris, you will be the second. The gentleman in the red tie, please. Oh, okay, sorry.
Wolfgang
Wolfgang.
Jeszcze raz, ja mam pytanie do Jefin.
I have a question. How do you think, what impact could have the culture in all of the forms and processes? I have this impression that very often the culture is being treated as a decoration, but for me it's in the center. Economic reforms of the country, well, those reforms need a cultural progress, and I see in it this chance and this potential.
Let's take a few questions. We'll respond. Boris, would you like to ask your question?
Первый вопрос у меня к Игорю Драндину.
Well, are the sanctions against Russia really needed? What answer do you expect from Russia to those sanctions? What should be the reaction on the policy that Russia uses? And a question to Mr. Steinberg.
In Riga summit, because this question was raised in the morning, but in fact by words or by action, leaders of these countries not only break their commitments but also challenge the whole idea, the whole European idea. So do you think certain preconditions have to be put for their attendance of the meeting?
Thank you. And now the gentleman in the red tie, please.
Thank you. My name is Kaha Kokhreze from Georgian Dream. This was the question I wanted to deliver to you. You know that Georgia signed the association agreement. We guarantee independence of judiciary. We guarantee basic civil liberties and freedoms. We guarantee freedom of speech in general in Georgia. We do the reforms according to the association agreement related to the economy and to build the inclusive economy for everybody, to benefit everybody in this process. We also reform the country security system according to the NATO new package, so on and so on. What else can Georgia do to get better access to the membership? I mean, to make our European friends to open door of the membership. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments, or shall we? Okay. So let's respond. I think Evgeny, you had the first question.
Yes. Let me try to stay short. And political context consists of institutional part and cultural part. In my opinion, the main mistake over the last 25 years was that we have over-exaggerated the institutional part and underestimated the cultural part. Let me give a small example. If we were to describe the Ukrainian culture in one word after the events of the 20th century, that would be insecurity. Because Ukrainians don't feel themselves as stakeholders of their own rules, they view corruption as a tool of security. Because when you have unjust rules, corruption is something that helps you to protect yourself against the unfairness of the rules. Thus, we should think of anti-corruption activity in the context of improving general security. But when we are separating the two issues, we are pretty much fighting something that cannot be fought. You know, this is a very simple thing. Can I step in with the Georgian question as well? Yeah? Okay. You know, this is probably not. I'm definitely not in a position to speak on behalf of the EU because, you know, besides the fact that I have a 5-year entry visa to the EU, I'm not really European Union representative in that sense. But the thing that we feel very strongly in Ukraine, and this is something that is important in Russia, in Georgia, and in every other country, that is also very much underestimated. Because we are dealing with very infantile states, very immature states, the states of the former Soviet Union have, let's face the truth, come to exist not because of the victory of their liberation movements from the inside, but because of terrible mistakes in Moscow that had the side effect of the whole thing falling out. And yes, there were thousands of heroes in each country that were fighting for the freedom, but for many people, independence was something that just simply, you know, came out of blue. So what happened, the question that we should ask with regard to this is, who is really an actor in each country? Who is able to responsibly decision make in each country? Technically, actors are the governments, but only technically. Because the question, and this is the question to the Ukrainian government, this is the question to the Georgian government, this is the question to any other government of the post-Soviet, are the governments actually capable of responsible decision making? Does their planning horizon allow that responsibility to fit into their decision making? Do they have the capacity and do they have the ability to decision make responsibly? And usually the response is no. They act as actors, but they're not actors, and that pretty much reminds how, for instance, a 7-year-old kid that has parents die has to decision make. Well, the quality of that decision making will not be good. And this is what happens in our countries. Thus, the West is treating these governments as fully capable of decision making. And what we have in fact is we have irresponsible governments in many cases, and we have other actors that are just growing up to become mature. For instance, the civil society. For instance, the political parties. You know, they are just developing, and this is a dynamic process. It will not be short, it will take a lot of time, and this is also not a quantitative but a qualitative process. For instance, the question of changes in Russia will be very much dependent on how the middle class will be developing in big Russian cities, and whether it will actually transform from the middle level of income, from the group with middle income, into middle class, which actually has middle class values, that is capable of institution building. This has not happened so far, neither in Russia nor in many other post-Soviet countries, and this is only beginning in Ukraine.
По поводу санкций отвечу очень коротко и очень, наверное, понятно.
No, I oppose to all the sanctions against the economy, which are directed to the banking sector. I'm of course against. However, I am ready and I understand, and I approach the sanctions in a good way when it comes to sanctions against people who commit crimes. If you want to, you can even turn to the Russian opposition. We will help, we will support, we will hold council who should be part of the list. I think that those sanctions will be successful, and the sanctions that harm regular people, they push Russia away from Europe when we cannot do this. In my opinion, what should we do? Well, I think the more Russia will come closer to Europe, the quicker Putin's power will come to an end, and the quicker the Russian opposition will win. So what can we do? Well, we can do a lot. We can delete the visa regime, why not? We can develop a tight cooperation, but this is a separate topic. We are ready to talk about this in detail. We are ready to make our suggestions heard.
I would like to continue with just said. Igor said that sanctions imposed to Russia is a bad idea because it affects, ordinary people, and the opposition is against. And I would like to ask Igor, what Russian opposition can do to stop Russian mercenaries, Russian regular forces, security forces, tanks, artillery pieces to be sent in dozens and hundreds to Ukraine. So what Russian opposition can do to stop it? And what would be the most effective way to stop Putin from waging the war against Ukraine? Then I would like to continue and say that our colleague Mr. Steinblock said that regional cooperation in the Eastern Partnership area is not very adequate enough. Well, let me refer to such regional cooperation of Eastern Partnership countries like Guam. It does exist, it did exist, and it will exist. As to money of taxpayers from the European Union coming to Ukraine, who will control them? Under Yanukovych, this might be a relevant question to pose. Now I will answer that the new government, which is just 1 week long, will control it, and in the government there is a lady who is American of Ukrainian origin, who is going to control this process. And I do not agree with your assertion that in the period of 2005-2009, during the rivalry between President Yushchenko and Prime Minister Tymoshenko, there was no negotiation process. I disagree, because the negotiation process started under this exactly authorities of Ukraine after the Orange Revolution in 2007, and there was a dynamic which continued and finalized during Yanukovych time. And now the last question by our friend from Georgia, what Georgia should do in order to get the membership perspective in the European Union, or membership. Well, my simple advice would be to follow and to implement Copenhagen criteria. And the way of prosecuting and putting behind the bars the political opponents of the former regime is not the best way to implement Copenhagen criteria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe our German colleague would like to respond.
Yeah, of course. I will not quarrel much, but I don't believe what you said. Yeah, I have this experience from a lot of friends which were negotiating with Ukraine in this time, and the disappointment about these years, yeah, for the European integration process. These years from 2005 to 2009 were quite lost years. It could be much more really negotiated in this time. And if you look to what happens and what is necessary for association agreement and DFCTA, I'm not a friend of Yanukovych, sure not, but the main negotiations and the result was finished in that time. But it is not necessary to quarrel about this. Yeah? But what is necessary for the Ukrainian society is to find a common strategy and fight against corruption. All the oligarchs which were under Yanukovych earning money are earning money now. Firtash, Akhmetov, Pinchuk, everybody is still in economic power, and for sure they will try really to implement their point of view, how to implement the association agreement. So on this you must be very clear what is the situation in these countries. These are corrupt countries. We wanted to really find a way to come closer to the European Union, to help you, to support you, but it is also, if you look to the banking system, for example in Moldova, the Russian influence of these. If you give money to this system, we have this problem with Banca Economica just had, and if you don't have a control on this system, which is directly the banks or some of these banks directly financed by Russia, and the money, European money, goes there, this is really for the European public debate, it is totally not. You can't not go this way. But I just want to have two more, because your question and one of the culture. I think also the debate about culture is very important to understand what happens in this country. And this, what Putin is arguing now, this anti-Western arguing, to be clear and to have an understanding of Russian history, this is not Putin's idea. This is in the history of this country. It is always was a strong intellectual debate about anti-Western and Russian national identity. The Russian soul was, in the 1900s, was really defined by anti-Western. And this is, the actors on this are, of course, intellectual, but also, let's talk about the church. The Orthodox Church is also a part of the debate in this country. And if you look to Georgia, what happened during the association debates, the Georgian Orthodox Church, combined with strong relations to the Russian Church, really was very active and not on the way of European integration. So there are a lot of parts in this society which you must discuss with, maybe fight with, about the level of understanding what is the European way. And of course, clan structures and corruption give security, and clan structures are, from the history, have a lot of power in these countries, and to change clan structures to individual responsibility and give, so to say, the security to objective structures in the society, this will be a strong way and a good way, but it is so much hard working on this, and all Europe must be supporting this. Yeah, we have the EU, but we have also the national states. In this combination, especially Poland and Germany have a special responsibility to support this project. And in Poland we have a lot of experience of this. In Germany we have experience and also money for this. So this could be a good tandem in supporting, besides the EU, the national authorities are also responsible for this process.
I would like to go back to the difficult position that our Russian friends that are in the Russian opposition. I think that you notice not just the political problem, but also a philosophical one. Why do I think so? Well, because that assumption that the nation is always right, nation makes no mistakes, it's not the right, unfortunately, it is not the right assumption. Because in such situations, we can never explain or why we had a genocide, Armenian genocide, Holocaust, or the Ukrainian one in 1933. The responsibility of the particular nation also is based on this responsibility of an entire nation, not just the political elite. Of course, you made mistakes, but it's just, I'm talking about my nation as well, the Ukrainians. We think about that. We try to draw conclusions from the past, and this is still ahead of you.
Thank you for this. We don't have time for any more questions, I'm afraid. We are a bit delayed, and so I would thank all the panelists, and we'll give floor to Janek Piekło, who would like to finish the conference, but I think also make some comments, or final comments on our recent round of discussion. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Talking about the sanctions, I remember martial law in Poland, and the sanctions which were imposed on the Polish as a matter of fact society, on Poland as a whole, after martial law was introduced, were much more severe than the sanctions you say imposed on Russia today. And the result of the sanction was that we managed to change the regime. Maybe maybe it is a paradox, but I think that it was related. Yes, I have one good news and one bad news. Bad news is that Mr. Mustafa Dzemilev is not coming because he wanted very much to come, and he got a ticket for the flight from Istanbul to Warsaw, and he was supposed to join us today. But because he was getting an award in Turkey, somewhere about 200-300 kilometers from Istanbul, he just couldn't manage to get to the airport on time. But he sent us a letter, which is really moving and nice. And I will read this letter. It's quite short. Dear friends, I am grateful for the opportunity to address you today. It is you, the intellectual and political elites of Europe, who today face the challenge and bear the responsibility to preserve global peace and prosperity. Once again, our region becomes a ground for a clash between the free world and its adversaries. In our turn, we continue our struggle against the Russian aggression. In particular, we are working in the following areas: providing compact settlement opportunities for people who are forced to move temporarily from the territory of occupied Crimea to the mainland Ukraine. Secondly, putting in the place a relevant governmental institutions and respective appointments in several ministries which will enable taking more responsibility for Crimea, Sevastopol and internally displaced persons. Third, socio-cultural and informational support for indigenous Crimean Tatars. For us, it is very important to get informational and legal support to Crimean Tatars who, under the occupation of their territory, are endangered with repressions and persecutions. In order to avoid greater tragedy, we urge international organizations to establish a permanent monitoring group on the territory of occupied Crimea. We highly appreciate your efforts in development of democratic relations. We wish you your conference a success. Sincerely, the President of Ukraine's Commissioner on the Crimean Tatars People's Affairs, Mustafa Dzemilev. So, it's his words. I would like to thank you all for coming today to the conference, and I'm really grateful for all the suggestions, remarks, for your presence. And our conference is also a sign that we are in the process of finding the united position on the developments in the Eastern Europe, and we would like to live in the better world. I would like to pass my thanks to the people I worked with. Thanks to them, it was possible to organize this conference, to our donors, to our partners, Heinrich Böll Stiftung, Warsaw, Stiftung Fundacja Współpracy Polsko-Niemieckiej, based also in Warsaw, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Eastern Partnership Civic Society Forum, PASOS, European Academy of Diplomacy, and our patron, Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs, and to my colleagues, to Luba, because it was her. I was just serving her for a while. In very bad manner, probably, not fulfilling all her wishes. To Lydia, Lydia decided to skip some very profitable assignment in Kiev in order to join us today. Oksana, who was taking photos all the time, she disappeared, so she's already there. Okay. To to the colleagues from the Academy, European Academy of Diplomacy, who are working with us at the registration desk. I'm sorry, I don't remember the names. Jovita is one of them, but the second I don't remember. Małgorzata, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, so I'm so bad in, And to the interpreters who did a fantastic job. 4 languages. And to our distinguished audience, to our distinguished guests. And we hope to see each other very soon in some other place, maybe other continent as well, and we will be continuing the process because... Sorry? Donetsk? What about Moscow? It will happen one day. It will happen. Thank you so much, and I wish you successes and all the best. Thank you so much.